not just about having sex, it's about having deep emotional, physical connection. Understanding the difference is really important.
Imagine thinking your marriage is normal until you realize it's anything but.
Majority of my marriage was my fault.
Philip Botha saw the cracks too late. The same arguments, the same toxic cycles. Until one day, boom, it was over.
It's not failure, it doesn't have to be a shame thing, it's just, it's no longer a fit. No one person can be everything to you. And it needs to go both ways.
Thousands spent on therapy, countless nights of self-doubt, a complete identity crisis.
When you are in such a pressure situation, you're basically just trying to survive. And now you need capacity to support another person emotionally. I just had nothing. I had absolutely nothing.
What if that wasn't the end? What if it was the beginning of something even better?
Do not look at a relationship so much as just focus on yourself, like how are you showing up?
This is the story of a man who lost everything and found himself.
Here's the script for you. You get a job, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids, and then you die.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azulay, and I'm here with returning guest and friend of the pod, Philip Botha. We're talking a little bit different. So last time we had you on, we were talking about entrepreneurship, we were talking about culture, but now we're going to get a little bit more personal and talk about life after divorce, which I know is a huge topic that a lot of our listeners are really interested in. A lot of our listeners are either going through divorce or contemplating divorce or have recently been through one. So Philip, thank you for coming on the show and sharing more of your personal story with our listeners.
My pleasure. Good to be on the show again, Mark.
Yeah, so again, with this being more personal, I just want to start, I guess, with the story, right? Like, so if you can run us through your relationship, we only got an hour, so, run you through, like, I guess maybe how it started, how it was going, and then when it started to turn a little bit, when you realized that something was amiss. It wasn't, perfect. It wasn't all perfect.
Yeah, some highlights and lowlights, right? Yeah, I think context is important because I think the journey up to the marriage or that decision, I think shapes what happens in the marriage or the expectations. So for me, very much a nice guy. Didn't have a lot of long-term relationships before I got married. I think the longest was like 11 months, like not even a year. I decided after meeting my eventual wife that after 2 weeks that I was going to marry her, right? So throw all caution to the wind, complete blinders, like this is the person for me. And she really is an amazing person. Like objectively, when people meet her, like, wow, this is an incredible person. So very much drawn to that, not really understanding the things that are important for me in a relationship. What are kind of my non-negotiables? What are my triggers? So completely ignorant. This was I was in my late 20s when we got married. We were married for 8 years. We were together 2 years, then married for 8 years. So to get together about a decade. And during COVID, we moved from South Africa, where I'm from originally, moved to the States. We were getting kind of a honeymoon period. Everything seemed okay. Pandemic hit, and everything just went to crap. And that's when when I started to look at the patterns. Not just accepting them, oh, this is just how marriage is, right? It's supposed to be challenging, got to work at it, all those things. But just realizing some of the cycles we went through repeatedly year after year wasn't healthy. We did a lot of couples counseling, spent hundreds of dollars, probably $1,000 on therapy, individual and couples, but never really were able to break those cycles. And now understanding with the work you and I have done since 2020, a lot more clarity, many more breakthroughs around what was I contributing to a relationship in those unhealthy cycles.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I want to take you back to COVID because I think that was a huge time, right, for a ton of people. Either people like yourself, where relationships start to fall apart or they start to become more clear, or other people getting into relationships, right, getting into relationships really quickly to not feel alone. So I'm curious, like, in your story, what was it about the COVID pandemic experience that highlighted some of these toxic patterns that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think at that point we don't have a strong foundation relationship.
Yeah.
Suddenly the foundation of the foundations, which is, physical safety, psychological safety and environment, the world just got turned upside down. We moved to the States. I got a job in Boulder, Colorado. I was laid off with my entire team, in April of 2020. I was only provider, sole provider. My spouse at that time was not working. She took a little sabbatical in the transition to the States. So we both unemployed basically at that point. And it was basically in survival mode. And what I realized then, and what I'm also realizing now, is that when you are in such a pressure situation and you're basically just trying to survive, keep your head above water and trying to deal with finding work, think about your own self-worth, uncertainty, and now you need capacity to support another person emotionally. I just had nothing. I had absolutely nothing, and she needed a lot more. And then on top of everything else that went on in our relationship was the last straw for her. And I'm realizing now again is where I'm, also kind of on the personal work side, kind of in a tough spot, that pattern is happening again. But I'm aware of like how I show up, better able to navigate what I need so that I can show up for the other person, and also being clear and being intentional about like, hey, let's take a pause, let's take a break, let's make opportunity to connect and me to support my partner, because we can't do life in silos or only support the other person when you feel like it. You still have to kind of make it work.
Right, so just show up day after day. While there is very real financial pressure, right, and survival pressure, and the number one thing couples fight about is money, right? It's money, it's class differences, it's lifestyle differences. Like that's, I think, where the rubber really meets the road. So it makes sense if the relationship doesn't have that strength or that foundation like you're talking about, it can easily crumble when times get tough. Did you find yourself getting like adversarial with your ex? Because I see that being so common, where things become personal. It's like, oh, you're doing this to me, or you become enemies.
Absolutely. It's like we see someone as the enemy. Usually, and what I now realize, understanding from the nice guy syndrome, is that it's because I have unmet needs and I have expectations, and I'm not aware of what I'm expecting, and it's those covert contracts, right? Like now, post-pandemic, post-10-year relationship, it makes a lot more sense. I'm still lagging sometimes a little bit in realizing what I need to, what's going on for me, what I need. Where there is someone like a good example is like, when I'm busting my behind to find the next contract, project, client, whatever, when I see my partner, sit on the couch and watch TV or TikTok, it's not the event in isolation, but the pattern, and there needs to be a conversation around what it looks like together. Not my judgment of, but like, hey, are we committing? Are we working together on, making our financial goals work? Just having that conversation, non-judgmentally, non-demandingly, making requests. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable emotionally, but I wish I was able to do that back then. But now I've learned like that's what's going to get me, help me feel like I'm not pulling out this alone, and that's because those are my triggers. Like if I'm the only person working hard, then what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I think that's really courageous, right, to have that kind of conversation. Because I think for a lot of guys, and me included, right? I mean, I've had this conversation with Caroline, my wife, of like financial realities, what our goals are, how we can contribute. Because especially making that transition from like dating to partnership is big. And me and I think you and I think a lot of men, like we usually spend a lot of money up front, right? Because we're trying to like look successful and be sexy and like be in court, the woman. But then, you realize, oh shit, we've been dating for a year, and like this actually isn't sustainable. Like if we're trying to like really build a life together, there has to be more equal contribution. It can't be all on our shoulders anymore, especially in the current economy. And, for the millennial and Gen X generation, it's just like you almost need a dual income. Especially if you're living in Colorado, right? You're living in a rich state. It's like you need dual income to survive.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think it's, so it's like two buckets there for me. You talk about like, how you show up, perception when you're dating, which is really interesting. Like a side note, dating wise, if you don't have a job, it just doesn't look good. Like it's just
Doesn't
like,
look good. No.
don't look, and or in transitional figuring things out. Just like it's not a good first impression, unfortunately. Well, I say for most people, to find that rare individual who sees potential in you, that's really special. So yeah, kind of on the dating side. On the work front, absolutely, and I think that's part again of the expectation setting. As cliche as it sounds, like what do you expect? Does your partner expect you to take care of them, and what does that look like? And that's okay. Again, no judgment. Just make sure there's no surprises once you decide to start cohabitating or getting married. I have a lot of friends who are very, very okay with, and people in our men's group that they love being the provider and they want a partner that takes care of the family or does their own, creative thing, whatever. That's fine. But, if you're high driven, you have a certain lifestyle in mind, it's going to take like 300K, whatever, then you probably, and unless you're like a high powered exec, which is a small percentage of the population, probably going to need two incomes.
Right. Yeah. And I think that lifestyle is really critical. And I think it's a question that like I've had, I'm more happy to talk about my experience in a moment of like, how much overlap do you need? Right. And I think it's a question that like, you talk about, that we talk about a lot in the men's group, is like, how much overlap is there versus how much like complementary is there, covering each other's bases and each other's blind spots. Because I don't think you can have both. You can like date a clone, or you could date someone that is more complementary to you. Where are you on that? I know some of you are currently kind of like playing around with, right? But like, what level of overlap seems helpful or desirable?
I know, if I had the magic percentage, I'd probably write a book and make some money off of it. But
you do. Yeah.
Reflect on like my spouse, my ex-wife, like we were so similar in a lot of areas. And the things that really mattered around like our passion for people, for society, social justice. We're both into psychology. We're fascinated with people. We love listening to people. We love, giving into and loving on people. Both very driven, high responsibility, very neat and clean and organized. But I almost felt like, reflecting on that, like it was too the same, too much the same. And that we didn't have a good balance of, and that's kind of what I'm realizing I'm drawn to now, someone that is more spontaneous, like more focused on just like being and pleasure in life, which I'm totally unbalanced on. Like if you let me be, I'll like work all day. I'm like one of those people, but I realize that's also not making me fully, really happy or satisfied. So I'm looking for someone to bring that into my life. But now it's the double-edged sword, right? Of like, well, can't just be all pleasure and fun. Like I love this saying you have, Marc, is that the adult needs to plan, or adults need to plan so that inner child can come out and play. So you have to earn your joy in this world. Unfortunately, like that's just the way it is. It's not going to be. Can't just be pleasure focused all the time. So that's the kind of sweet spot balance I'm trying to still find. And I'm accepting it's a journey. It's never gonna be an equation or just something you figure out on a piece of paper. You're gonna have to feel it out. There's gonna be trial and error, and it's gonna be conversations. But in that's the journey of growth and healing that I'm trying to lean into, as uncomfortable as it is, and as many mistakes I make. Is just we gotta figure out as a couple, as a team. Like what does this week look like? What does our goals look like? And we may or may not arrive there. That's the uncertainty and what we have to accept in life. There's no guarantee. A divorce have taught me that. That's the way it is.
Yeah. What was a challenge? Still is a challenge for me, frankly. Is like it changes week to week, or changes season to season. Like there are times when Carolyn and I really have to buckle down. And in that, like, social engagements take a hit, our sex life takes a hit, how much time we spend together alone takes a hit. Like we're kind of both head down, a lot of times like ships in the night, during the week. Like hopefully we can connect a couple times over the week, maybe over the weekend, but it's like really grinding, and there's sometimes where, money is flowing and life is good and the weather is beautiful and we can like chill out a little bit more. But I don't know, maybe like you, for me, like I wish there was just an answer. I wish I didn't have to like think about it every week and kind of like go back to the drawing board. But I think for a lot of guys, that's such a key point because I think we want it to be static and we want to have a routine, but it's not, right? I mean, it is really just like ebbs and flows, and it takes really being aware of like what the current stressors and threats are in your life so that you can adapt to them as a team.
I mean, Marc, do you feel it's like it almost sounds like it's one of those things, it's not a problem to solve, it's a problem to manage. But at the same time, I think if you are, even though the challenge of the week or dynamics might be different in your in life of your partner, certainly there's reps involved. I'm thinking of like relationship muscle being built. Is that like your experience as well? Like you do get better at it over time when both parties are engaged and trying to figure it out?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I had to allow with Caroline. Like for me, a big one was like, so I don't like talking about my work, right? So, one, I can't for confidentiality reasons. And two, when I'm done with the day, I just want to like zone out. I want to be in personal mode. I want to work on a hobby. I want to cook a meal. Like I don't want to like rehash the day. And like Caroline wants to rehash her day. She wants to go through like every single thing, every single meeting, like what she's doing, what she's working on, like just kind of give me the play-by-play of the day, and while sometimes I don't have the bandwidth for that, frankly, it does also let me know kind of what's going on in her life. So a mistake that I made is by not telling her even basics, like how many clients I'm seeing, is it a heavy week or a light week, like am I doing extra podcast episodes, am I traveling? Like she wasn't aware of the amount of load that I was under week to week, and the way that my business works is like, I can have some weeks that are very heavy, almost no breaks, back to back to back. And I have some weeks that are extremely light where I do maybe like 3 or 4 hours of work a day, scheduled work a day. And I'm a very different person on each of those weeks. My emotional capacity is very, very different. So I've some of the reps I've done is trying to be a lot more communicative of like how much emotional juice I have. Versus how much I'm giving to other people, giving to clients or giving to a marketing effort or whatever, because I think I just like assumed that she would know that in some way or be able to pick it up or like wouldn't take it personally if I was like kind of, zonked out at the end of a day. And that was all wrong. Turns out she did take it extremely personally and she wasn't able to mind read me. So I mean, other examples, but like that was one of like needing to really practice and do something that like I don't really want to do. Like I don't have a need to like emotionally cope after work by sharing stories about my day, but I have to do that so that she at least gets understanding of like what I'm going through every day, Yeah.
I mean, isn't that such a? I mean, I'm aware of not having a binary view of gender differences, but I feel such a guy thing. It's like we don't kind of internalize our emotions. We don't always articulate or verbalize it, and I feel women in general are much better at that. So that's, again, something I still get, I still lagging on. Like I sometimes notice there's some tension, some friction, and it's usually my partner responding to my mood, and then I'm realizing, oh, I am being like tense and quiet, and she's like, what the hell's going on, And so then I realize like, okay, well, let me just say how I'm feeling. There might not even be a request in there, or just like a solution. It's just, or what to do. It's just like, hey, this is what's going on for me right now. And it's so powerful because I feel women in general, especially my partner, like really good about leaning in and empathizing, and from there, it's like the stress gets relieved from me. I feel a lot better and I feel seen and heard and supported. And it just lightens the mood. And we figure out, how do we handle the evening together? Maybe she does dinner and I just go focus on whatever's on my mind,
Yeah, I think that's so true. And like, again, I fall in that trap a ton. I think most guys that I work with fall in that trap a ton. It's like, we're very different creatures. I think male and female psychology is really different. And, for listeners, we'll just stick to heteronormative just for ease of communication. But I think there's also masculine and feminine energies. We talked about it on the show, et cetera, et cetera. I always have to make the disclaimer, right? But I think like feminine energy or women in general, like they're so relational. Like they are watching us in a way that I think as men, we're not really aware of other people. Like if I'm around another grumpy dude, I'll be like, oh, he's grumpy, whatever, right? Like I'm gonna go do my stuff. But I think women, like they're much more connected to us. And like you said, like if we're in a bad place, they're also gonna get kind of pulled into that bad place with us. They're way, way, way more fluid in a way that I think as like masculine dudes, like we actually like cannot comprehend, right? It's like an alien language. And again, like for us, like saying our emotions, like I'm feeling upset now, right? It seems completely useless. But it's very helpful for them because they don't take things personally and they like have a handle to hold on to.
100%. Yeah. No, very true.
Yeah. So I wonder, I want to go back to kind of your marriage, right? You talked about toxic. It got toxic, right? And that is the number one question that gets asked from this podcast is, how do I know if my relationship's toxic and what do I do about it? Right? We wrote a whole blog on that a couple months back. People are always emailing us that question. That like always happens. I mean, you see in the men's group, right? I mean, that question comes up again and again. It's like, how do you know when you're fucked? Basically, right? Yeah. And my kind of working definition of toxic, and I want to hear if you have one or what you think about this, is it's kind of like when your trauma and somebody else's trauma perfectly overlap. And I like that definition because it doesn't mean that there's toxic people, right? So like your relationship might be toxic, but it doesn't mean that your partner is toxic. She could be in a relationship with somebody else and her trauma could never get activated, right? Similarly, like if you have toxic behavior, I know I do, right? If I find the right partner, it might never ever get triggered because I'm not getting that particular button being pushed. So I'm curious, A, what do you think about that definition, if you would change it or add to it? And B, like, when did you know your relationship became toxic? Like, what was that toxic pattern or point in your relationship, in your ex-marriage?
Yeah. On the definition, I'd say, I mean, that resonates. The way I kind of think about it is like, you're almost like co-triggering each other. Like, you trigger the other person gets triggered and their response triggers your trigger. And I can, share some back from our marriage, but it was very much obviously rooted in childhood with parental relationships. I'd add to that though is I don't feel that necessarily is a disqualifier for me. Is do you have the relationship, the personal and the relationship coping skills to navigate it? Yeah, that's a key thing, and it's super hard. I mean, I've been working on this for years and years. It's still not easy. I'm not someone who walks away from challenges and growth opportunities. I'm just like one of those maybe masochistic people who enjoys pain and discomfort.
I mean, you're a hard charger. Like you don't give up, which I think is very admirable.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, it's probably a lot to do with growing up in the rugby culture where you got pummeled and there was no excuses. You were expected. It's kind of like, I guess, football in Texas. Like you're on that field, doesn't matter what size you are. You're gonna grow up to be a man. So taking some of that maybe toxic masculinity and taking some of that grit and resilience into relationships, I feel that's helped me at least try and do the next one much better. But I'd say in terms of when I realized toxicity, I mean, I don't know if I ever got to the judgment or evaluation. I do know if I reflect back on how I showed up in that relationship versus now is in my marriage, I was very much looking over the fence, which my therapist at that point called it. Like you're so focused on what the person doing on the other side of the fence, what their behaviors versus how you're showing up. And I heard that intellectually, but it never brought me home. I never took that home. And during the pandemic, being unemployed and then, you're being divorced was really a good all-time life low for me to start rebuilding and rethinking. So then I had the necessary humility and took the time to do very deep introspection and think about how I show up in the relationship. So, and maybe it's a simplistic way of looking at it. My advice or opinion is to not look at the relationship so much as just focus on yourself. Like, how are you showing up? Yep. What is there for you to own? And what is your role in the friction, the unpleasantness, the toxicity, whatever you want to call it? And one of the most painful but also helpful things I realized is that majority of my marriage was my fault. Like, I think I mentioned before the book, Man's Guide to Women from the Gottman Institute. I think I listened to that book 3 times. Like, and I probably do, go through it again and realize that all the things, and I actually wrote down a list of those things, and I actually wrote a letter to my wife 2 years after our divorce went through to apologize and owning the things that I needed to. And that was super painful, but it's also super freeing. And that like, if I do these things right, and own them, it might not fix a relationship, but at least I know I'm showing up the best I can. And then, wait for the other person to come to the party. And then at least you can know, clean conscious, I've done everything I can. And this is not going to work. And in hindsight with my marriage, like, even if I did those things right, we probably still weren't a match. And it's nothing to do with what she did wrong. It's just like we weren't a fit. But I was only able to see that with knowing more about what I need in a relationship.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. What are some of the things that you realize that you need? Because I think you've done a ton of work on being able to identify needs and values. Whereas, you know, again, I can relate to my own story before I did a lot of this work. And I think, again, men in general, it's like, we don't even know what we need. You know, like I think when you ask a guy what he needs, like he'll be like, I need to get laid. I need to be fed. I need to I need to make money. I need to have, you know, roof over my head. But it's not like emotional needs, because I think as men, for better or for worse, I think there are positives to it, but like we're conditioned out of having needs. I think we're really good at like putting our stuff in a box and containing ourselves so we can like get shit done, right? I think that's, like, again, there's something really powerful about that, but you got to be able to turn it on and turn it off. You know, you can't live in that all the time, which I think most men do, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of man up, no excuses, get it done, you know. And I feel, I mean, this is the challenge of life, right? Nothing is binary. It's that, and also acknowledging your legitimate needs and then owning it, right? It's not, you know, either or. And I mean, I'm still figuring it out. I'm still trying to figure out like what do I need. I mean, we joke about like, you know, needing sex, needing food, but I mean, those are basic human needs, so they are important. So I think those, don't ignore the feelings, but go deeper than. It's not just about having sex. It's about having deep, you know, emotional and physical connection, which, you know, superficial relations won't get that need met. So understanding the difference is really important. And that was kind of like one of the basic things, is that just love languages is such a simple thing. And this was I don't know if I can, you know, curse on this podcast, but it's like the mindfuck. Mindfuck was that I think like 4 years into my marriage, 8-year marriage, like we did the love languages test. My primary love language significantly is physical touch. My partner's weakest or lowest love language was physical touch. So we were on opposite ends of the spectrum. Yeah. And it's not like there was a close second for me. It was physical touch and then everything else. You know, for her it was everything else and then physical touch. So it's like
complete opposite.
You're already behind the 8 ball. It's gonna be tough. So I think that's a big part. I'm a very physically affectionate person. And you know, sex is part of it, but that's not it in itself. I need someone to, I think, be on the same page around mission, like what are we doing, but also at the same time bring complementary skills. You know, so that's where it gets tricky. Is like you kind of need I think we've spoken about this well, and therapy and men's group is kind of a shared vision, what your life looks like. You know, and it can be a fun, easy conversation, even during dating. Like I think it's like joining a company. Like you need to understand that what they're working on is something you care about. Yeah. You know, so and then like they gotta have to figure out the tactics and the strengths and how you're gonna go about doing this. So I've learned, for instance, attuned to my partners that sometimes like she just needs to like do something spontaneous, go out and like break the routine of monotony. And I'm thinking like, oh yes, my computer is calling, but like that sounds really good. And I end up having fun and feel recharged. And the next day, you know, Thursday morning, I'm good to go and don't feel like it should be Friday like yesterday or something like that. You know.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. I want to lay some out too for other guys that are listening, and you can maybe jump in with some other needs, because I think we need to just model like what you could need as a guy. You know, I find that that's really helpful, especially in the men's group. Like, hey, I got this. Do you guys have that? One that I became aware of and was like kind of embarrassed about, frankly, was in the beginning was like I needed somebody to invest in their relationship with me. You know, kind of similar to the vision thing. You know, and I think that was embarrassing for me because I was also kind of a nice guy, where I had this idea that like, oh, I'm doing everything, right? Like, I don't need anyone else to take care of me. I'm totally fine, right? Like, I'm just going to like put forth all the effort. I'm going to carry the relationship on my shoulders. Like, I don't need that kind of support. And I thought that was what it meant to be a man. It would have meant to be like tough and strong and all that kind of stuff, right? But like, I found the resentment grew really quickly, right? Because even little things like keeping the house tidy, you know, taking care of our shared home, or you know, making a change at work or advocating for a raise, my partner doing that, right? Or, devoting time without me prompting to spending time together, or grocery shopping, right? I mean, like, for me, my love language is acts of service, so I kind of keep going back to that. But underneath the acts for service, like, it's not that I want people to, like, do stuff for me or, like, be my slave, which I think is where the shame came in. It was really about, like, co-investing in that shared future and being, like, and, like, tangibly investing in ways that, like, I could see. Of like, oh, okay, we are building something together, and like that's our future, and that's how I know that you love me, And I wasn't really aware of that until I was in a long-term relationship.
Yeah. It's such a nice guy thing, isn't it? Right, jumping in and filling the gap, like being the people pleaser and the problem solver, and actually in that doing the service to the relationship and the other person by not giving them opportunity to own something, or even communicating the opportunity for them to like contribute. And that's, think about it, kind of self-involved, selfish as well. And I think that kind of reminds me is a big one for me as well, is the ownership, the shared owning your own stuff. I realize that I'm like, that's a big one for me, because like I work so hard on myself, like own my own shit. Like my mom would say, like, dude, you're so tough on yourself, like chill, And I actually, after I got divorced, I went, had a whole dating thing, which I think is almost a podcast on its own. Marc Azulay like coached me through, Azulay like coached me through dating. That was very interesting. But then, actually, was in another relationship for 11 months again, like not even a year, and decided for the first time ever breaking up with her, because ending the relationship because she didn't. I realized, like, I saw a lot of myself in her, my previous self, the previous version of me. And like just angry, like below the surface, angry all the time, and like kind of snappy and not explosive maybe as I was, but it's like, and learning about her background, a lot of childhood trauma, like some stuff that she kind of downplayed. I'm like, holy crap, like that's trauma right there. And just did not want to get therapy, like said it's a waste of money. And this is someone who was a top salesperson in her company, made 3 times what I did, owned properties and stuff all over. So money was not the issue. It was like, she doesn't feel it's worthwhile. And I'm like, okay, well, this is affecting our relationship. We had the conversations, and I just didn't see ownership there. And I said, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but I had to separate and said, I need someone that's going to not be perfect, but I'm happy to support, journey. I actually get a lot of satisfaction from that, but I need to see the effort and the ownership. Yeah.
God, there's so much good stuff to talk about in what you just said, that little nugget there. But let me just go over the thing you most recently said. And I know you have a version of this, I have a version of this, but like the importance of EQ and the importance of like equal enough EQ levels, because I've seen this in my own life. I've seen it with every single guy that I've had in a men's group, right? Where it's like, the story often is that they come to therapy because they have a low EQ, right? And usually like their partner or their kid, something happens there and they're like, oh shit, I need to like figure this out. They usually don't come on their own volition, honestly, right? They come because of marital difficulties, divorce, drug addiction, a kid yells at them and they get that mirror, right? And they're like, okay, I need to really work on my EQ. And a lot of them start in the shame place of like, I'm dumb, I don't have these skills, I'm an asshole, whatever it is, I need to like work. Turns out therapy works, right? So the EQ like goes up. And then what I see 9 times out of 10, and I think your example that you just shared is literally what happens, is like they leave their partner because their EQ climbs and they actually surpass their partner, right? And they realize that they want to have types of conversations that their partner's not capable of having, or they want to, work on trauma, or they want to go to a couples retreat and do kind of like psychological, self-healing work with their partner, right? And like then the partner is really resistant to it. So yeah, I'm curious, your experience with that and what you think about kind of just EQ in general. Like, is there like an error bar? Is there like a range in which you have to be close enough to be able to have any kind of chance of success? I would say yes. I think there has to be like a close enough, small enough gap.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I don't think I'm necessarily explicit or intentional about like evaluating someone's EQ score, and which I'm sure there is. But it's more so that's generally where I find connection or not. Like if I thrive on deep conversations and deep emotional connection. And And generally when that's not there, it means probably the EQ isn't there as well. I mean, I feel like there's a little bit that kind of being on different journeys. It just even, you know, highlights the bigger question for me as like, what is the intent of marriage in society? It's probably a really deep philosophical question. Is that where marriage back in the day, if you look at history, it was about survival. It's about family union, like mostly physical safety. Nowadays, you know, we have abundance over abundance in society. You know, very few people probably watching this podcast, you know, is worrying about bombs falling on them or where they can get their next meal per se, you know. And now it's like, well, there's so much external emotional growth and journeys and life, you know, over 40, 50 years, 60 years, like, you know, how often are you gonna walk the same path?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing I'm racing with, and I've learned probably to maybe pessimistically put less emphasis on the marriage itself, but more emphasis on the core foundational relationship, and making sure at this time and place we're fulfilling each other. I'm being the best partner I can be. This journey makes sense, but not trying to, you know, make something work that doesn't. And reconciling, it's not maybe failure. That's the thing I'm racing with right now. It's probably not, it's not failure. You know, it doesn't have to be a shame thing. It's just, it's no longer a fit. And I think we should be careful not to like give up, like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable anymore. I'm not attracted to you anymore. Like whatever, I'm out. Like that's not healthy either. I keep coming back to like, well, how am I showing up from tuning to my partner? Like what's going on for them? How am I showing up? And every time I'm like, as critical as I might feel sometimes, I'm like, holy crap, I missed something. Like I've not sure. And I actually apologized to my partner a couple of nights ago. I'm like, hey, you know what? I know it's been tough, a lot of, you know, some friction, strain. So I apologize for not, you know, being as emotionally supportive and comforting as I could have been. And she actually just broke down in tears. I'm like, wow, I just needed to hear that. I'm like, wow, you know.
Yeah, listeners, I just want to like underline what Philip just said. Like, do that. If you look to the show, if you take one thing away from the show and you feel like you're in a place where he was, where like he's not emotionally supportive, just tell your partner. Because yeah, Philip, I think that is an incredible skill. And like you said, it can just melt away like days, if not weeks of tension in like whatever it is, 15 seconds, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if other guys will relate. I'm sure some or many would, is that you kind of beat yourself up and like, shoot, I should have said this earlier. Why didn't I say this like 2 nights or last week or from the beginning? I'm like, I mean, like give yourself a break, I guess. It's like you're in the cauldron. There's a lot going on. It's a lot of pressure. You know, we're human. And I think how we treat ourselves is probably a good reflection of how often we treat others. And I feel I can be tough on the people closest to me sometimes because of those expectations and high expectations. But, you know, at the same time, like, you know, I should give them a break like I should give myself a break sometimes.
For sure, man. And like you're just sharing a little bit of your story. It's like, it's hard when you're in the cauldron, like you said, but if you zoom the camera out and you look at the trend line, like the trend line is going up, right? Like you're having those conversations like more frequently and they're more effective, and it's like the reps are happening faster. But, you know, I know you're like this, I'm impatient. I want the stuff now, you know, like I want to like, I want to have it grokked, you know, cognitively and then execute perfectly every time. But like, that's just not how the emotional world works, you know? But I want to bring you back to marriage because, like, you know, listeners to the podcast know, you know, I got married recently. I got married at the end of June.
Yeah.
And
exciting.
That's cool, right? I mean, that's great. I think for me,
how's that going for you?
it's going well. I mean, I'll say it. So far, it's going well. We're still, it's still early, right? And I think we're like trying for a kid now, and that is like kind of the main impetus for getting married. Was to like build that family foundation, and we are both, you know, even though progressive therapists, we're both traditional in some ways, and marriage is an important thing for both of us. I'll talk about myself for a while, but it's interesting because Caroline made a ton of life changes after we got married. Like all the stuff that I was like, you know, frankly, like critiquing her on or trying to coach her, you know, critiquing the worst, coaching the best, like getting a new job, working on fitness and health, like all this kind of shit. It did not move until we were married, and until I think she felt like safe enough and connected enough, or maybe proved that like I loved her without those things, right? Like I was willing to like commit to her without those things, because I think that was part of the test too, where she was like, oh, does he want me to change to love me, or does he love me now and then I can change? It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. So that's like that was interesting to me. It was like love first, then change. But yeah, I guess what I wanted to ask you is like, yeah, like what is the point of marriage? You know, and I think especially for individuals that are not interested in children, right? Which is like, I think more and more people these days, frankly. You know, I think people that are, you know, like you said, both people that are both career focused and maybe their careers take them in different directions, you know? I don't know. Like I think it is a much harder ask when it's not about, you know, uniting resources and protecting the homestead, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the point of marriage, or the expectations of what marriage is going to be like, the relationship in that is really wrapped up in what you expect from the other person. And this is still an area I'm like, spending a lot of time thinking and working on, is that, you know, no one person can be everything to you. Right. And it needs to go both ways. And I feel sometimes these unspoken expectations about what it's going to be like in marriage. And I don't I'm not against it in, per se or across the board, but it needs to be in its right place. And for me, it can very much be a commitment, and the ceremony of the wedding is a outwardly profession of commitment and love. And I feel there's a lot of wholesomeness and power in that, and bringing the community into this relationship that you want to commit towards long term. What I have trouble with is when the marriage is kind of it's almost a little bit like handcuffs in a way. Like, well, you can't leave now. You have to work on this stuff because we're married. We have this thing on paper. You have a ring, and we have a mortgage and all that stuff, and even kids. Like, and that's not healthy. Like, those things are kind of like outflows for me. Those are outcomes, results, outputs. It's the connection, relationship, the really nitty gritty. Whether you're married or not, it's going to be the same stuff. The stakes might just be higher, but those fundamentals needs to be present, needs to be worked on. And I must say, Marc, now I think about it, I'm kind of pissed, that no one like taught me this stuff or helped me think about it before I got married. You know, marriage preparation, I feel it gets thrown around a lot. A lot of people do. I still don't think most people go through that. And it was never encouraged by my, traditional community. It was just kind of like, well, here's the script for you. You get a job, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids, and then you die. That's the script, Yeah. And I'm like, I'm pissed because it's bogus. It's bullshit,
Yeah, I wish there was a return to that. Like, I know, like, premarital therapy, I think especially through churches, was really common, like, in the 60s through the 80s, but that's really dropped off, and, like, I'm privileged to be a therapist, so, like, we did do a lot of premarital therapy. We got engaged, and, like, next week we signed up for therapy, right? But I think, like, courses around emotional intelligence or how to resolve conflict, or like you said, like visioning. I mean, something like a workbook, which I know there are tons out there. Maybe I'll put some in the show notes or something, but like having some kind of structure on, like, yeah, this is actually like a really big deal that you need to be pretty like eyes open, right? And very intentional about moving forward. One thing that I like in my culture, the Jewish culture, is that they say that, we don't believe in soulmates, right? We don't believe in this kind of like love at first sight Disney World version. But what we do believe is that the marriage ceremony is your soul's mating. Like, that is the soul's mating ritual. And the idea is, like, once you get married, now you have to build your soulmate, which I think is like, it adds like the work component to it. I've said in group and individual, it's like, I think, relationships are like 60% overlap and then 40% work, right? So it's like the overlap doesn't have to be as much as you think it does. It doesn't have to be 100%, but it's also going to take 40% work, no matter who you are. Even if you're a perfect match, it's going to be work, So kind of the marriage is like committing to do that work and committing to like, and what the work is for our listeners, it's like learning each other's love languages, like Philip was talking about. It is like, figuring out what each other needs, figuring out how to communicate, figuring out how to resolve conflicts, figuring out the finances. Like it's all that kind of like business of it. It's not that romantic, right? But it's like very necessary for success. you know?
Yeah, and more fulfilling, I'm sure. Yeah. And Marc, I'm just curious. I don't know if you have the numbers. Maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm curious the kind of Jewish culture approach to marriage and weddings versus maybe secular world. What's the success ratio? I think in the U.S. I think 48% of marriages end up in divorce. I think only 52 are successful.
Yeah, I don't know. I would love to actually look that up. Maybe I can like edit it in and see like if it's more or less successful in the Jewish culture, you know. So I know like some of the studies that I've seen is that early marriages tend to fail, right? So if you get married like sub 25, there's about an over 60% chance to get divorced. They also find that, you know, second marriages tend to work out a lot better than the first marriage. So it ends up being, I think it's around like a 70 to maybe like 82 is what my brain's telling me % chance of success of second marriages. However, if the second marriage doesn't work out, then you find that the person can't quite ever get a marriage going. Like then it goes from like 3, 4, 5, like multiple failures. And I don't know, they have reasons for that. I mean, my gut is like they didn't do the psychological work, right? Like you said, they didn't work on themselves. Like they are the problem at that point.
Yeah, you're not owning your stuff and you're doing the same stuff over and over again, basically. Right. Yeah.
You date the same people, you find the same problems. Like you just kind of do it.
Same expectations. The other person just gotta fit me. Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good pivot. But kind of back to your story is like, how did you and how are you recovering? Recovering, maybe I don't know. That might be too charged, but like life after divorce, right? Like I know you've done a lot of therapeutic work. You did a lot of dating. You know, you're like figuring out. You know, you did a career change, right? So it's like, I guess if you could speak to those listeners out there that are maybe recently divorced, we'll call it like 6 months to a year out. Like, what did you need to hear? What do you think they need to hear? Like, what helps like get back on your feet and moving forward in a healthier direction?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a journey. I throw in men's group therapy in there, having healthy male relationships. I think for me it was, and I think I just kind of stumbled upon it, and well, I'd say stumbled upon you as a therapist, but I think the program was very much introspective and ownership and looking and just kind of breaking it down to how I'm showing up, my behaviors in the relationship. I think there's a component of like why I show up a certain way, and it's back to childhood stuff with my dad, and I've always had that awareness, but I never connected and translated to how does that impact me showing up in a relationship. So it was really a period of reflection, like what happened in the marriage, kind of educating myself. Like a lot of the books that you recommended was super powerful. Rethinking how I expect myself to show up as a male in a heteronormative relationship. That was huge because I had all this subconscious programming going on, and it just wasn't helpful. In a healthy way, I needed to man up in a lot of ways and be someone that my partner can depend on, and not thinking like, oh, if I express my needs or desires or wants, that I'm now being playing into patriarchal society and being oppressive and that kind of stuff, like not over index on that. So, that was very uncomfortable because I had to like break down this model of what did I expect of myself in a relationship. And it's just interesting how closely that was tied to just male on male relationships, because of myself and my dad, like having like affection and emotional vulnerability with another man was not a thing. Like, and I often didn't have very deep relationships, and that was part of the therapy growth plan for me, was to seek out those relationships. And it's amazing how much healing I got from that. It's just to know like, hey, you're not alone. Because I felt, understanding my failings in marriage, like I failed all of womanhood, all females, and I got a lot of forgiveness and a lot of healing and safety from those male relationships. So very much a kind of a reframing how I just show up in all relationships. It wasn't just marriage per se, not just romantic relationships, and also at work as well. Same patterns that showed up in marriage showed up at work sometimes. A lot of like passive aggressive kind of iceberg anger, things that happen at work. And I've seen the growth in romantic relationships also benefit my work relationships, which was kind of surprising as well. I think, and then it's just like doing the reps, doing the hard yards, like trial and error, and accepting, like, in a way, I'm kind of starting over, and that was tough. And I think that can be tough for a lot of people, is that like, oh, I'm 30 something, 40 something. Yeah, it's like I'm starting over. And what I told myself, what someone else actually asked me, is like, well, how old would you be if you didn't start over? Or rethink your relationships? I'm like, it's the same age. So, you can't undo the past. You can just own the moment. And like, however long we're still on this planet, on this earth, think about how you want to live it every moment. As cheesy as it is, carpe diem, how do you want to live today? And there's a lot of power in that. And that's what energized me. And like, you know what? Whatever the next relationship looks like, how long it may be, I want to be fulfilling. I want to have substance and fulfillment from this relationship. Because I never want what it was before. I don't want the marriage again. Like, fuck no. Like, that was also very, very good negative reinforcement, is to like not repeat the same thing over again.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Let me ask you about the like oppression piece, because that was a big part of my story too, as a nice guy. And I think like that doesn't get talked about enough. Because I think my industry is failing men. There's a whole tangent I can go on, but long story short, right? It's like, I think my industry still thinks men are these like aggressive bullies, right? That's kind of like the toxic masculine archetype. But what I see from most guys, I think especially in like left-leaning communities, right? Liberal states, guys that have maybe had abusive fathers or alcoholic fathers or whatever, it's like, they're like you and me, where it's like, we are the opposite. We don't have that aggression, or that aggression is like I said, it comes out sideways, or it's passive aggressive, or it, for me, manifested in addiction and self-destructive behaviors. Like, it goes somewhere. But we're not these big bullies. In fact, we need to be a little more bullish, maybe, right? A little more assertive in our lives. And I think, I think my field is like 50 years behind, because they're still trying to make men more sensitive. But I think most men, at least in the millennial generation and young Gen Xers, are like, we need to actually be more forward.
Yeah. I think it's like anything, it's balance. I resonate with that, because and I'm sure a lot of guys can. It's like, you saw how dad treated mom, and you don't want to be that guy.
Exactly.
So then you go the pendulum swings the other way, and you actually miss a lot of the attraction that is needed in a relationship. That a more feminine partner would expect from you. And it also shows up, and this stuck out for me from the book Number One Mr. Nice Guys, that nice guys tend to be overall underachievers. And that hit me hard, because I'm like, I don't expect to be, a billionaire, 0.01% income, and someone famous on TV. It's like, I just want to live my potential. I just want to at least know what I'm capable of, and living to that. And that had hit me hard, because I'm like, oh, I got this. My view of masculinity is weighing me down. It's like an anchor, like, or a backpack full of rocks, and I'm trying to sprint up, a 14er. And it took me a while, especially with dating. I think dating was a really good judo for that, a gymnasium for like practicing, showing. Yeah, because on dates, it's like, women are attracted to someone who is not overly needy and like finicky, but clear. It's not even assertive as in asserting dominance, but it's like even like insisting on a certain quality in a restaurant, for instance, a certain level of service, taking charge, ownership of that. Where the old me would have been like, oh, I don't want to be a bother. The waiter has a lot of, things going on. But like, no, I want a clean glass that doesn't have prints on it. Like I want a good bottle of wine. Service needs to be good. I can do it in a a gentle, very humane way, but be firm around what I want. And I didn't have that skill. That middle ground wasn't there. I was either like, agitated to like exploding, or like super diminutive and just like kind of waiting for someone to come, bring me a menu or something. Like even that test ground was really great. And like you can blow it up into a relationship like, we are navigating uncertain times. What's the plan here? And, start, taking initiative there, in your relationship, or when there was a rupture, when there was a fight in the relationship, me being the person, starting the repair.
Yeah.
Old me wouldn't do that. I would wait for my spouse to like come, to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are really good examples, right? Like, I like the word initiative, right? It's like you being a leader, right? Taking charge, like naming the hard thing, so that the woman doesn't have to do. It's called, emotion, which I know you don't know, but for our listeners, like emotional labor, right? That's like a big term that's being thrown around. It's like women don't want to do all the emotional labor all the time. They're actually getting sick and tired of it. And there's a lot of stuff online that's confirming that belief. So, they're getting fed that a lot. It should be more, divvied up. Yeah, I guess a quick tip from, the Hitch Azulay thing is like if you're dating, right, a quick tip is like when you go to a restaurant, order the appetizers. As the man, just order like 2 or 3 appetizers for the table. And bonus points, order something that you think that she'll like, but would never order herself because of like body image or whatever. So like get like the loaded fries, or get like the fried calamari, right? Or get like, the thing that is like maybe a little bit unhealthy, because you're actually creating space for her to like have something that she enjoys, instead of like just having to like order the salad or the Brussels sprouts because she's embarrassed, right? So quick tip there. I think the assertiveness is really key. I guess like, okay, here's a question I wanted to ask you, because you said a little bit in this conversation. I mean, this is a question that I'm also doing market research for MTO. I would love to find the answer to, right? Because I think my belief is, for a lot of guys, the core issue is masculinity, right? Either it's the restrictive, box we put ourselves in, it's trauma around gender roles, it's like conditioning that we got growing up, what about it means to be a man that are maybe antiquated. But guys don't come to therapy for masculinity, right? Like they come to therapy because of anger management, or because they got divorced, or because they're drinking too much, or because they, like I said, their kids yelled at them, or they had an incident at the school or whatever, right? Like, how did you make that shift to being like, oh shit, it's actually masculinity? Like all these kind of other things are more like surface level symptoms.
Yeah. 100%. It's like when something explodes, like when I, unemployed, divorced, when my spouse had to leave me for me to like really dive into it. I think there's a movie with Mel Gibson called What Women Want. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's a good one to watch again. But I actually had to understand that and not assume it, because I made assumptions. I didn't actually explore like how do women in general, or just my partner, the person I'm interested in, like me to show up, like what attracts them. Again, the book, Men's Guide to Women, like completely blew my mind. Like it completely shaped my paradigm, my view, my framework for how I think I should show up. And I was thinking about this earlier. I think, we, especially American culture, like I'm very interested in how cultures operate. U.S. culture is very focused on the extrovert ideal, like public figures. We love our celebrities, and we have these models. You have the, very far, if you want to put labels on it, left, very kind of woke, very soft, very feminine type model, and then the opposite end of the spectrum, very loud, overly competent, maybe not so competent, but very confident individuals. And we don't have to throw out names. Like that's the model. Like that person knows what's going on. That's a leader. Personally, I'm going to call bullshit, because it's in the middle for me where it resides. It's someone that can lead with vulnerability, but also take initiative and show up in a strong way. So I had to understand that first before and then rethink about how I show up. I'm like, holy crap, there's a big gap here. Like, no wonder I have such a tough time, because I was always friend zoned. I was really good about being the friend in high school and college. And I fucking hate the friend zone, because I just didn't want to be friends. Actually, I wanted to date you, but they come around eventually, right? Just being nice.
Never did.
And no, actually,
0%.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah, because batting 100% for failures there, and it had to actually step out and almost exhibit behaviors which I thought would be a jerkish or patriarchal or oppressive, and see the opposite happen where, wow, suddenly this woman got turned on towards me and attracted. And yeah, I must say dating became really fun after a while,
Yeah, absolutely, right. And like, what I'm hearing from you, and I see it in your smile, is like, it probably felt better for you too. Because I think women, right, they are telepathic in some ways. And I know from my experience of the friend zone, it's like, yeah, on the surface, I was like that nice, compassionate guy that was like, oh no, I can't believe that happened to you. Like, that guy's such an asshole. Like, but underneath it, I think women could pick up on it. Like, I wanted to fuck them, first and foremost, right? Like, my intentions weren't pure. I was trying to like manipulate them in some way, shape, or form. I was trying to drive a wedge between them and whoever they had a crush on, right? Like, I was like poisoning the well because I was hoping that they would realize that I'm the one for them, and that, that these other guys are just dicks. And I think women, I think it's inherently untrustworthy. Whereas when you say being more direct and clear, it's like, it's trustworthy. They know who you are, and they know what you're about. And then they can make a real educated decision on if they want to date you or not.
Yeah, 100%. I think understanding also the societal context for women and how like physical safety, both physical and emotional safety is such a big thing. What I realized is the sweet spot there is, and well, let's take one factor out of the picture where I thought like it's all about physical attraction, right? Like idiot guy, right? It's like I'm attracted, initially to women, how they outward appearance. Same for me. I've always been active, very athletic, in really good shape, even for being 43 years old. People think I'm like in my early 30s. That's always been a constant. What's changed is how I show up in the interactions, in the dating game, so to speak. And what I realized the sweet spot is when you walk into the engagement or any situation with no expectation, totally attuned to the individual, being completely present in what this experience is, however long it might be, just conversation, might be several drinks, might be dinner, might be more, going home, whatever. Never having expectation. That's been the greatest experiences. And always treating the other person, I say with respect, but also treating yourself with respect. Like not being the chump who, obviously this person is not actually really into you or having conversation, but they'll order the lobster bisque or whatever, right? Like just being, having your wits about you as well. That's a sweet spot. And I mean, I had a lot of dates that didn't go anywhere, but I went through many experiences, many iterations where I kind of built on the experience and got better and better as I went through it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And like you're saying, I think dating is a real coming of age and a real like you said, it's a real like gymnasium to try out all these different things because it is fairly low risk, But we do have to wrap up our program. Then we have a lot to talk about. You'll definitely be back on the show. I love talking to you as always. But yeah, Philip, where can people find out more about you online? I know you offer coaching. If someone wants to is inspired and wants to work with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Marc. It's always fun, and I mean, this hour flew by. Happy to share my trials, tribulations, wins and losses with anyone wanting to just chat. So on LinkedIn, on my website, drop 30 minutes in my calendar. Happy to chat and just connect with people, pay it forward. That's why I get a lot of satisfaction about just partnering with guys in a similar journey. Professionally, I also do coaching if there's particular career things. Sometimes it's managing life as well with career. Really big on that, and also leadership. What does masculinity look like in organizations, especially organizations maybe a bit more feminine? How to find that balance? That seems to be a topic that comes up a lot. And also a lot of skills I found that's actually helpful at work as well as home life is crucial conversations and nonviolent communication. Some good resource out there. Super, super powerful life skills, things I wish I knew many, many years ago. It just skills that help us as males navigate modern life a little bit better.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we'll put all the resources in the show notes. Definitely call Philip. I mean, again, this was a more personal conversation, but our previous episode was much more around his professional work, around, building culture in organizations, helping people, advance up the ladder, or like you said, leadership training. And all this stuff is applicable. I've actually found with a lot of guys, they come in with work issues and then it becomes personal, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're a small business owner or you lead a small team, like, if you're having an issue in your job, it's you, right? I mean, like, it's a reflection of you. It's not like you're a different person when you go to work. So I think Philip is a great resource, one, just like to educate and learn from, and also he's done the work both personally and professionally to build up this masculine leadership in his life. So give him a call, check out his stuff. His website and his LinkedIn will be in the bio. So Philip, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Marc. Great. Have a great day.
And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like the podcast, do all the socials, like, share, subscribe, put it out. We're at Men's Therapy Online everywhere, every social media platform, Men's Therapy Podcast, all your podcast platforms. Check us out. Check us out on YouTube. We're trying to build that up and build up our Instagram. We have video versions of the show. So if you want to see what we look like and see kind of our facial expressions, check that out. Give us a subscribe and share it. So share it with somebody who, maybe is recently going through divorce or thinking about a divorce or is trying to date again. I think, Philip really highlighted that it's so powerful to hear from other men that have been in the same place and to be like, oh yeah, me too. I also feel that way. I also feel lonely. I also didn't have a great relationship with the guys. Oh, I also had, came out passive aggressive anger issues. Like, you're not alone. A lot of guys feel that way. And the more guys you can talk to about that can be honest with you, the better off your healing is going to be. And you're not going to repeat the same mistakes. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, do those socials, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.